Dear brothers and sisters in Christ Jesus, we are entering into the fourth day of Novena to St.Clare of Assisi. The theme which I have chosen for today is the relationship between Francis and Clare. What was the relationship between Clare and Francis really like? Someone has said that in meeting Clare, Francis found the feminine side of himself, his tenderness. And in that relationship with Francis, Clare found the masculine side of herself, her strength. Each of them chased fear away from the other. Francis no longer had any fear of being tender and thus became strong. Clare, through her relationship with Francis, developed her own tenderness and thus became strong. Francis rediscovered his masculinity in Clare, his strength, and Clare found her femininity in Francis, her nourishment, her tenderness. The bull of canonization, drawing on the evidence of Beatrice, affirms that the initiative for the first meeting between Francis and Clare was his. It is to say that Francis only initiated. The sources, however, do not agree on this point. The biographer prefers to understand that the initiative for their first meeting was of them both, or better, of the Spirit of the Lord, who drew them to each other. Another witness in the canonization process maintains this witness is Bona di Guelfiuccio, the personal friend of Clare's youth, who said, "The prudence of the biographer in speaking of a reciprocal attraction seems justified." But another detail, again recounted by Bona di Guelfiuccio, leads us to think that the very first sign of interest was shown by Clare. Because of this, the witness many times accompanied her to speak to St. Francis. She went secretly, not to be seen by her parents. So it was Clare who most often went to find Francis, not the other way around. Certainly, it would have been easier for her to leave her father's house than for him to enter it. But the fact remains that here we see Clare showing a strong spirit of initiative. Clare's response to her relatives' threats also deserves a comment. She, it seems, grasped the altar cloth and uncovered her head, showing the sign of the tonsure. At this point, her relatives dared no longer touch her, which shows that the tonsure indicated to them that Clare was already vowed to the Lord and therefore outside their jurisdiction. The church did, in fact, recognize the status of the devout woman or devout religious as not only meaning the professed nun but also women who had begun a life of penance even while remaining in their own homes. Francis too had enjoyed exactly the same protection. This renunciation and this choice took place in the hands of Francis. Let us not forget that Francis at this time was 26 and Clare was 18. The responsibility of the young penitent is clear, but what is also clear is the trust with which the young aristocratic girl confided herself to this man whom many consider a madman. Clare's choice, following the advice of Francis, was an entirely spiritual one. The moment of a decision on that Palm Sunday, from which all the rest flowed, is one of maximum interest. From then on, Clare set herself as a poor woman to follow the poor Christ and the road of the cross. Her renunciation of her wealthy clothes, her self-despoiling as a passage to the following of following of Christ, who had nothing but the cross. All had a powerful spiritual significance. Here we have an incident being used and wisely by Bonaventure in order to highlight his balanced understanding of the Franciscan charism. Two contemplatives, Sylvester and Clare, were charged by God Himself to communicate to Francis's will that Francis give himself to the active life. Bonaventure's testimony is undoubtedly a late one, given that we find no sign of such an episode in any of the preceding lives, either of Francis or of Clare. However, Bonaventure's voice on a subject so debated within the order cannot be taken lightly. It is probably not without reason that an episode in which Clare assumes the role of a guide to Francis only surfaced after her death in 1215. In fact, while as far as we can tell from her writings, Clare did not like to speak of herself at all, and therefore hid behind the memory of Francis. But after her death, her sisters would have heard no problem about recounting such an incident in order to underline the bonds which bound the sisters to the brothers. The observation that there is no mention of this incident in the canonization process does not carry much weight, since at the canonization process they were called to give evidence about the holiness of Clare, while this incident could be thought of pertaining more to the holiness of Francis. What seems strange here is the fact that Clare did not speak with her sisters about her relationship with Christ, but her relationship with Francis. However, if you look closely the matter, it is not as strange as it seems at first. Amen.